A warm welcome, everyone, to Performance Impact Week. It is wonderful to see all of you here. Honestly, it's a bit surreal. This was a simple yet exciting idea that we had 6 months ago. And back then, like the 20th of April, that felt like it was endless into the future. But now we're here. My name is Michelle Wester. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Noli, and I will be moderating this week together with you. Before I introduce our first two experts of the day, there are some key points I want to highlight, and I want to give you a framing of what we're trying to do here and why we're trying to do this. I want to kick us off by saying how grateful I am for the entire team and their endless work to make this possible. This would never have happened without our awesome collaboration. Thank you to the Kirkpatrick partners, to the Institute for Transfer Effectiveness, to Travado, and of course to my team at Noli. Without you guys, this would never have happened. Of course, I want to aim a big thank you to all of our experts and all of our practitioners as well for doing this. Thank you for all your time. Thank you for sharing your expertise and making this event possible. Last, but definitely not least, a big thank you to you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for contributing and making sure that we are really creating an unforgettable week together. We are more than 2,000 people from 88 countries that have signed up for this. Your engagement, your contribution will make sure that this is a week that we all won't forget. So thank you for being here. The Performance Impact Week is a week that we've designed for learning professionals all around the world. People that are day in and day out fighting to help other people become their best versions of themselves. Help them learn new skills, help them change behaviors tirelessly day in and day out. This event this week is for you. We want to create a first-class experience where you're being inspired, where you get to network with peers from all around the world, and hopefully also learn something new. The week is divided into 5 different themes, one for each day. We'll kick off today with positioning learning to the business. Tomorrow, we'll move over to partnering with the business for impact. On Wednesday, we'll talk about design for performance. And then on Thursday, we go to measuring what actually matters. Friday will be a little bit special. We'll have a panel discussion around AI and the future of impact. Each day will somewhat look the same structure-wise. Each session is divided into 3 different blocks. Each block is 30 minutes. First block is for our experts, where they will share their expertise around the theme or the topic of the day. The second 30 minutes, that's for our practitioners, where they will share a project or initiative, something around what they've done regarding that topic and that theme for the day. The last 30 minutes of each session, that's designed for Q&A, the possibility for you to ask questions to the experts or the practitioners, and to network with the other people, the other peers in the event. So we'll open up breakout rooms where you have the possibility to discuss the topics of the day, get to know other people that are in the event right now. I'll explain how that will work even better when we get closer to it. There's also a chat in the bottom right corner of your stream. If it hasn't popped up, make sure to open it. Make sure to say hi to one of my colleagues that are in there right now moderating it. If you have any questions, any reflections that come up, please do share it. The more, the merrier for sure. So any kind of questions or reflections that come up, make sure to share it right away, and I'll make sure to pick up your questions and highlight it towards the experts and the practitioners at the end of the Q&A session. With that said, I want to introduce our first 2 experts of the week. And this is a conversation that I've been looking forward a lot. and a conversation that I think we not too often get to experience or have the possibility to listen into. It's a conversation between a learning leader and a CFO talking about how the company looks at learning from a financial perspective. And the two people that we will get to listen into is, first off, it's Robert Wagner. Robert has a CV that quite few of us can match ourselves with. He's the co-founder of CLO 100. He's also built, together with Kathy Hoy, the Learning Leaders Program. He recently launched the CLO Impact Index, which is a global benchmarking framework for learning leaders all around the world. He's for many, many years supported and helped learning professionals really get that position and that influence that they can and should have to be able to create impact within organizations. Today, he's joined by Marko, Horvat, who's a CPA and has been for 2 decades CFO and financial leader within large organizations. He's been advising multiple Fortune 500 companies. He's currently SVP and in business transformation at ELB Learning. He also sits on the advisory board for the San Francisco University, and he's on the Forbes Financial Council as well. Today, they will have a conversation around finance perspective on learning, and as I mentioned from the beginning, I've really looked forward to this conversation. So it's a genuine pleasure to introduce both Robert and Marko. Welcome to the stage.
Hey, thank you,
guys.
Michelle.
Thank you.
What a wonderful introduction that was. Really appreciate that.
Of course.
So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation with Marko. And we had a brief chat last week, and I think some of the topics that we're going to be talking about today are going to be very, very relevant to everyone that's listening in. So should we kick straight off?
I think you should.
Yeah,
I'll open up my popcorns and lean back.
Excellent stuff. Okay, so Marko, listen, you've been a CFO in the past, and now you're working in business transformation. When you were evaluating requests for training and investments in learning, how did you like to see that show up in the P&L?
So it's probably everyone's favorite thing, right? Let's talk about P&Ls first thing Monday morning. I'm sure that's what everyone signed up for. So I think one of the things you have to realize is that when we're evaluating options that are brought to us, we expect that story to sort of be told to us, right? And I think you also want to tell that story when you're going to the CFO. And I mean, it might sound like a lazy sort of response, but the reason for that is, if I'm evaluating different things, I have sort of 2 choices, right? Of course, I'm always going to do my sort of due diligence to make sure that the math checks out and that it's strategically aligned and all that kind of stuff. But I think it really is, to the benefit of the person that's proposing the change to lay out that story. And so that ability to build a business case and tell that story is a key skill set that I think organizational leaders really should learn so they can demonstrate that business impact and give a clear framework for accountability. Because if you're able to give that framework in terms of accountability on how this is going to impact the P&L or how this is going to benefit the business, you're sort of speaking the same language as the CFO. And so now you're able to align on objectives and strategy on a much more consistent basis than perhaps 2 ships passing a night, evaluating things on completely separate criteria. So to answer your question, when I'm evaluating things and how I expect it to show up in the P&L, I'm kind of expecting you to tell me that story and how you expect it. And then my job is to validate your assumptions and see if I agree with them.
Yeah. And I think, I think you're dead right there. The storytelling is something I think as L&D leaders need to get better at. And I mean, you're talking about ROI as well, aren't we? And I mean, I know when we were chatting last week, we talked about the underskilled workforces. And I mean, as a CFO, what are the costs for the organization for an underskilled workforce?
Yeah. So, again, we start talking about ROI and all these things. And I am very cognizant of the fact that one of the reason learning leaders are learning leaders is because they didn't want to become accountants, right? Um, and so one of the things you have to realize also is that, finance people are finance people because they didn't want to become learning leaders, right? So bridging that gap and speaking the same language and aligning along, priorities and true north and those kind of things are really, really important. So to double down on what we were saying before, I think when you talk about ROI, return on investment, right? I think that's really, really important because that distinguishes, what is sort of a one-time expense versus an actual investment. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit later. But when we talk about, that this is something that is going to bring a future benefit, that the organization's better off for having made this expense. And where you can land with that is, I wrote an article. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you can find it, but essentially talks about that, hey, having an underskilled workforce actually presents a real cost to the organization. And the story is this. I'll tell you guys a story. Um, that essentially when CFOs get together with the finance function and the rest of the business, and they start laying out the forecast for the business in terms of what they expect the business to bring in and perform, how they expect the business to perform. An underlying assumption within that forecast is capability, right? They assume that the organization is fully capable of executing on all the things they need to do to, reduce costs, increase revenue, whatever those key business objectives are. And that's not an assumption that is necessarily clearly articulated, but it's something that's becoming more apparent, right? So we've all seen the news. It seems like every other week, some large organizations were laying off thousands of people in the middle of the night. In the past, that would be huge red flags, right? People would just get really, really scared about this notion that an organization is reducing the size of its workforce. In the past, I'm talking about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that would indicate some kind of trouble ahead for the organization or some kind of poor management decision. Hey, we overhired. But the story that's coming out now is the reason why everyone's reducing headcount is because of productivity. They're expecting people to be more productive than they ever have before in the entire existence of the organization. So they're betting big on capability. And research shows that there is a tremendous difference between your high performing people and your low performing people. And I'm not talking about a linear relationship. There's a McKinsey study out that said your highest performing people are 8 times more productive than your non-high performing people. So that's where you sort of lean in, I think, when you talk about the return on investment is ensuring we have the capability or enhancing the capability so that we can have better business performance in the future. And that better business performance is sort of becoming a baked-in assumption in a lot of the forecasting and a lot of the planning that organizations are doing.
Okay, so you've got the capability, and that's basically it's not strategy, is it? That's you say if that's going to be baked in. So how should the L&D leaders be interpreting that? What should we be doing differently to what we're doing at the minute?
I think part of it's a perspective shift, right? It's positioning learning and development as a strategic partner, as sort of a necessary thing that organizations must have in order to, sort of achieve the goals that are necessary to be achieved, right? And the interesting thing is if you look at the attitudes of CFOs, right? So if you look at CFO priorities, the things that they worry about, et cetera, for the last, for as long as I can remember, several years, a consistent top 5 priority within CFOs, CEOs as well, is, do they have the right people? Do they, a well-trained workforce is usually an incredibly high priority. And if you look at budgets, budgets are actually, despite the fact that, traditionally training, learning, and development have always been tied to headcount, right? It's the easy way you budget is, per head, per dollar per head sort of thing. Despite the fact that a lot of organizations are reducing headcount, we still see L&D budgets are actually increasing, or the commitment to L&D is actually increasing. So the key thing but we're not investing in the same things, right? So it's all about finding out what are we trying to do with our people, and how do we achieve that capability? And the opportunity to have those conversations, I think, are more ripe than they ever have been, because the reality of the situation is we're living in a world where everything is advancing so incredibly quickly, right? So the best example I can give, I was at a football game, an American football game, to clarify for the audience. And I overheard two guys from a couple of Silicon Valley startups, and this was in November, and they were talking about different LLMs they were using as coding assistants in their IDE, and one of them mentioned it was like, oh, have you tried this new one? It just came out today. And the second person was, no, I haven't tried that yet. I'm on this other one that came out 2 weeks ago. Right. So literally, every 2 weeks, everything is advancing. So technology is advancing at a faster pace than human capital is able to keep up. So what that means is so let's put this all together, right? A key foundation of organizational performance is capability, right? That capability is being baked into the assumptions of every single forecast, every single 5-year, 3-year, 1-year plan of every single organization. And we're seeing that manifest in everything that's coming out where people are betting big on productivity. That is against a backdrop where technology is advancing faster than people can keep up. And we know that organizational leaders are worried about the skills and the knowledge and the abilities of the people that they have. Do they have the right people in place to execute on their plan? And if you put it all together, the only way they can execute on these things is through native learning and development. And that is simply because the market does not have the skill sets available for people to just go out and hire into those positions, right? Or for them to churn through their organizations to find the people that they need. There simply aren't enough people with those skills in the workforce. So in order to get to that point, the conversation is around capability. It's around native, learning and development to really bring people to where you need them to be to achieve these goals and these desired outcomes.
Okay, so I think that's the ideal situation. So there's a lot of people probably listening today that they're in the situation where maybe they're having their budgets cut and they're really feeling it. So there's got to be a disconnect between what L&D are reporting and what actually matters to the business. So where do you see that disconnect, or where did you see that when you were CFO?
I see it's a lack of perspective, and it's not telling that story completely, right? So that from a CFO perspective, they kind of every time you spend money, it's in one of two buckets, just to oversimplify everything. It's either an expense, which means it's sort of a one-time expenditure that it's something I have to do. There's no future benefit to it, right? And then there's investments. Investments are things that I spend money on that I expect to bring sort of a long-term benefit to the organization. And I think too many times learning and development gets just sort of pushed into this compliance-based have to do sort of expense category. And I don't think learning leaders are doing a good enough job presenting the case that this is an investment, that this is going to bring future benefits to the organization. Um, and so I think a lot of it is separating out what is mandatory regulatory training versus skills based sort of training. Nobody, and a lot of that comes from adding value to the business. And when we finance people talk about adding value to the business, what we're really talking about is what is the core mission of the business? What are our customers expecting from us? And what are things the customers are willing to pay extra money for? Right. So if I talk about enhancing the skill set of my people, then how does that add a benefit to the organization? Well, it adds a benefit to the organization several potential ways, right? It might increase the output of whatever skill, good, et cetera, I'm bringing to the market, right? If I can create the volume of things available for sale, then that's going to create a thing. The other thing is quality. If I can present a better quality end product to the market, that is something that people are willing to pay for, right? But nobody's going to pay you extra for being an extra compliant organization. Those are table stakes, right? I expect you to be compliant. So framing L&D as an enabler to create value within the business. When I talk about creating value, I'm talking about creating things that delight and increase the value to the end user, the customer, is kind of where we need to have that conversation centered on.
Okay, so just going back to them then. So what were your biggest frustrations that with the L&D teams that you worked with? So where were they not hitting the mark?
So I think a lot of it, I think there's a disconnect, and this isn't just an L&D specific one. I think this happens across a lot of parts of the organization. There's a disconnect between what matters to you as a practitioner and what actually matters to the business, right? So I look at things like completion rates, compliance, seat time, et cetera. Those are all meaningless to the business, right? So, and this is going to be really controversial, maybe, especially given the audience here, but this concept of better learning, I need more money. Why do you need more money? Because, people are going to learn better. That is a concept that is completely lost on the finance function because the assumption is that the whole point of learning is to learn. So the idea of learning better, it's akin to going to a doctor and, a doctor saying, I'm going to make you more well than another doctor. Well, the whole point of going to a doctor is that you assume you will be made well, right? So I think a lot of it is thinking about it in terms of what actually matters to the business. And so as a CFO, I'm not really interested in things like, completion rates, compliance, the amount of people that get their training done on time and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying they don't matter, but I'm saying my language is all about how do things impact the business. So things like speed to knowledge or speed to competency, the things that allow me to achieve business objectives through learning and development. It's the end result of the learning development in terms of how it makes my business better. Those are the things I'm more interested in how the L&D function impacts me.
Okay, so what you're saying there then is that the traditional L&D metrics are important, but just keep them within the L&D team. What you want to report back to the business is actually how that impacts on the bottom line. How does that help the organizational strategy? And so there's some work that needs to be done from the standard metrics that everyone's used to producing to then
Yeah,
translate that into the language of the CFO.
and I'm not saying completely upset. I'm not saying that those metrics don't matter, right? And I'm not even saying that we should abandon those metrics and upset the apple cart. What I'm saying is take those metrics one step further, right? Where if the goal is to, increase technological literacy so we can take advantage of generative AI tools better, right? Or bring in agentic AI. There's all this, thing, this potential for agentic AI to impact our business, but we need to get people there. That's the end result. And you can still use those traditional metrics in terms of, okay, from like an OKR perspective, for example, in terms of we know we're on the right track of achieving this result because here are the metrics we have in place that say we're on the way. But I, as a CFO, am interested more in the end result than I am the metrics along the way, if that makes sense.
That's completely, yeah. And it's something that we've been talking about at CLA Wonder for a long time now. Okay, so just going back, we had a bit of you were talking about productivity earlier, and so what's the distinction or difference between individual productivity and organizational productivity?
Yeah, so I think this is a fascinating topic. Um, again, I wrote a series on this on like a 5-part series on LinkedIn. You can find
Mm.
it for free if you follow me there. I essentially talked about how in this age of generative AI, so you think about it, we really haven't been in this universe very long, right? And yes, AI has been around for a really, really long time. And even generative AI has been around longer than people think. But when I talk about sort of the age of generative AI, I point to November 2023. That's when ChatGPT 3 came out, and that's when it became a big deal. So to give you an idea, Netflix, which is, here in the United States, something we use for streaming services, it took them 5 years, I think, to get to 1 million concurrent users on Netflix on the streaming service, right? ChatGPT 3, OpenAI's ChatGPT 3 got to 1 million concurrent users within 6 months. So the speed of adoption is just so incredibly fast. So everyone's trying to figure out what's the best way to use it. And one of the most common ways that we see people experimenting with it is just by letting, sort of this notion of in order to get familiar with it, you have to experiment with it, and let's let everyone experiment with it. And let's hope, like cross our fingers and hope that they stumble upon something that will magically be a scalable way to make the business better. And we find that increasingly that is not happening. And one of the reasons why is what you were talking about, this idea of organizational versus personal productivity. So if I have a tool and I use, AI tools every day, without any sort of context or direction or strategy, I'm going to use that tool in ways that I find most interesting and ways that I find most beneficial to me personally. So, I hate monitoring my inbox. My inbox is a complete mess. So I'm going to use the AI tools to clean up my inbox and make them better. And, maybe I'm not a very good writer. So I'm going to, set it up to auto reply. I'm going to have these nice, structured 3 paragraph replies to everything someone writes me. I'm going to summarize all my meeting notes, all these sort of use cases. All those use cases make me individually productive, but it doesn't necessarily add value or make the organizational productive, right? And when we talk about individual productivity, it's the things that take time out of my day. But we talk about organizational productivity, it's a little more nuanced than that because it's not just one person, it's across the entire organization. And there's certain things that require individual collaboration, that require individual coordination. I mean, organizational coordination, organizational planning. And those are things you can automate away, especially not with one individual using AI tools. So I think a lot of the time when we're talking about productivity, especially in this age of technology, yes, it is important for people to become AI literate, and it's important for them to understand technology. The way we work is changing every single day. But I think it's important to connect as we're looking at building training in this new age of generative technology and AI. I think it's important that we talk about from an organizational perspective, what's the overall organizational strategy and how do we align the training to develop the skills to enhance the workflows that enhance the organization's overall productivity instead of just being trapped in these individual productivity sort of silos.
Okay. Okay. Right. We're coming towards the end of our time, so I've got one sort of last question for you, and I think hopefully this is going to help bring everything all together. So, what would make you see L&D as a true strategic partner and get you to invest in it?
Yeah, so I think if you think about it, like I said, if you look, I would just hold organizational leaders to their word, right? Whenever they do these surveys, whenever they do these priorities, having a highly skilled workforce, like I don't think any business leader would argue that having a well-trained, highly skilled workforce is important to the execution of their business. So I think that this is a tremendous opportunity for L&D leaders to learn that language and have those conversations. And, I don't think you need to convince people that, the importance of a high skilled workforce, but talking about how you can strategically partner with them and why that matters. And again, how that is essentially baked into the assumptions that you have in running the business already. Having those conversations enables you to have more strategic overall conversations and positions you as a strategic partner because now you're not just concerned about your function. Now you're telling me you're concerned about the overall business. And now you become an enabler of my strategy, right? And you're communicating clear to me how the things that are important to me are also important to you. And we can align on those incentives. I think that is the best takeaway I could give someone.
I think what wise words to say that enabler of strategy is key. And I think if that's the only thing that people take away from this last half hour,
And
shifting the
yeah,
mindset to be actually making a real difference to that organizational strategy, then I think it's been useful.
so here's my hot take, right?
Go on.
If I haven't given one already, if you look at organizational leaders, and this age of ever change, I'm keep beating that that horse, but they're talking about they need all these people. If your business leaders are openly saying, where can I find the people that have the skills to do these things I need to be effective? I think we've failed as an L&D organization, right? If the organization feels like it has to look outside of the organization to find the skills and capabilities necessary to execute, need to be raising your hand and say, hey, We don't need to look outside into the market. We can build that capability in-house, and here's how we can do it, right? And here's why that's important. So if you can get into that mindset in terms of you're not going to find those people. Those people don't exist. There aren't enough of them. But we can build that in-house. We have the skills and capabilities to solve that problem natively. I think that's a home run.
Excellent. And I think on that, we're at time. Thank you, Marco. That was it's brilliant.
Yeah, that was really brilliant. I had high hopes, I must admit, but this was even better than I was hoping for. I think just getting an insight, Marco, into like your way of thinking. I think a lot of the things that you're saying, I think the majority of us we've heard it before, but actually hearing it from you and understanding your perspective on it, invaluable. Like this was really good. I love the better learning means nothing. And I love the analogy to the doctor. I was like, yeah, I get that. Like a doctor that's actually telling me I'll get you better. Meh, I just want to become well. I love that. Thank you to the both of you so much for this. This was amazing. We'll reconnect in about 30 minutes for the Q&A and networking. Right now, we've heard a CFO's perspective of how they look at learning and their view of it in their organization. Now we'll um, bring in what actually happens when we try to bring in a new initiative into an organization. Because the thing is, we can do all of the things right. We can make sure that we involve stakeholders. We can work close to the business, involve managers, really design something that will make a difference, but the business can still say no. And our next guest has really felt this for real. Her name is Dr. Tekeisha Zimmerman. She's spent more than 15 years in different learning leader roles throughout multiple organizations that I'm quite sure that you know about. Some of them are Amazon, Affirm, Expedia. So she really knows what she's talking about. She's right now the founder of Masterpiece in Progress Learning, and her upcoming book, Check the Verse, is under contract with ATD Press. I'm really glad to have Tekeisha on our stage right now, and welcome to the event.
Sorry.
No worries. I was like, you're saying so many good things right now. I can
I
pick you up.
I was. I forgot to hit unmute because I was so enamored and in awe about what I just heard from Robert and Marco. And a lot of it is things that I've learned from the L&D side. So yeah, you'll get to hear what that sounds like from us.
Perfect. I'll leave the stage to you. Open my new popcorn. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Michelle. So as Michelle so wonderfully stated, my name is Tekeisha Zimmerman, and I have been in learning and development for a little over 15 years. And I was really excited to come here, not only to meet each of you, also to hear Marco and Robert's perspective on some of the things that I'm about to share as well. So I'm about to share what I learned when the business said no to me. So a few years ago, I was working in an organization and there was a need to bring on a leadership development team. So new team, fresh start. We'd never had a leadership development team that was solely focused on building the capability of our leaders. I had been doing this in the space for quite some time in L&D, and I was really excited about what we could build. So I put my team together and we went to work. We did all the things that L&D does. So we started with research. Many of you are likely familiar with human-centered design or design-centered thinking, one of those. And so that's where we started. We went directly to who we were supposed to, which were the managers. These were the people who we were here to support. So we ran focus groups to really understand what they needed. We looked at data. So we had access to a variety of data within the business. We looked at things like retention rates and where we might be having the most dissatisfaction among our senior leaders so that we can determine where to start and what we were trying to achieve with retention and keeping those leaders happy. We also, in terms of human-centered design, really put together what I thought was an amazing proposal for a program. It had lots of impact. It was also something that would support the business needs. It was just what I would consider the dream proposal. And then we put together a small snippet of the curriculum because coming from an L&D background, we sometimes truly understand that it is important to show what we are thinking because that visual can be the thing that can take you over the edge. So we were sitting there, my team and I, patting ourselves on the back. We thought we did everything right. And we went into a meeting with our senior leadership team. So this would have been our people team. So our chief people officer, some of our senior leaders who reported directly to the CEO at the time. They were really anxious and excited to hear what we'd found. So we put the presentation together, shared the proposal, and there was a little bit of silence in the room that honestly, I will say I was not expecting at the time. And finally, one of the leaders asked me this question. They said, "Did you talk to the HRBPs about this?" So to give you a little bit of background, and HRBPs, they're called different things in different organizations. These are our HR business partners. Some folks call them people partners. But in our organization, the HRBPs were the ones who were the closest to the business. They worked hands in hand with all of our senior leaders. They were at every business review. They were the liaison between a lot of the center of excellences and the business and those needs. And in that moment, I realized that I made a huge mistake in not bringing them in. That was the moment that changed how I build everything. And it was the moment that gave me build, which is a framework for how I work with any business partner, any client that I am supporting, as it comes to learning and making sure that the learning has the impact that the business needs. And so build is really a practitioner framework for positioning L&D initiatives to the business. I was smiling as I was hearing the conversation right before me because I said, yes, if I'd had this and if I'd thought of this, um, then that first conversation might have gone a little bit better. But build means bring the right people along. A lot of times we'll start with the content and the learning metrics in mind, but build talks about starting with the people, really understanding the conditions of the organization that you work in, thinking about how to integrate learning into real work, leading with those relationships, not curriculum, and then designing for sustainability and not just for the moment. So I'll get into that as I talk about the second iteration of the same program. So after leaving with all kinds of egg on my face, and not having spoken to the right people, I went back to the drawing board. And the first B in build is about bringing the right people along. So, as you may have remembered, this was a not only a new initiative, it was totally new to the organization. it was an investment. We had gotten the dollars. We had already built the business case for the need for this learning. So that part was done. Now it was bringing the right people along in the right way, having that stakeholder buy-in. Really importantly here, having the HRBPs, which are our business partners, that were right by our side because they were the ones who could also speak for the business in a lot of the things that we were trying to build. So I wanted to point out that building the room is not just about meeting a bunch of people and saying, okay, I heard you. Yep, I'll put that piece into my presentation. Yes, that sounds good that I have this person on board. For me, I really had to realize it is a mindset. It is a mindset about how I think about learning. Learning is part of the business, is integral to the business. So bringing the right people along from the business is the right thing. And it was the first step in any program. And it has been the first step in any successful program that I've built since that day. Understanding the conditions. So this is probably if build could start with a U, I would have changed it and put it there because understanding the conditions of the business is something that we just cannot pass by. Um, it means understanding the language. It means understanding what is important. Even if the program that you have is right, the metrics say it, the data says it, you heard it from the folks. If it is not aligned with where the business is, the condition, and we don't have the correct conditions right now to make that program work, it needs to sit on the shelf until we're ready. And that is my hot take that I would love to discuss with you if you join a breakout room. But there are three kind of questions. So as I went back to rebuild this program, I asked these three questions. The first one is, what's keeping the leadership team up at night? Now, I know a lot of people are probably sitting out there saying, you cannot just get everything from the leadership team. You have to hear from the people. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. But there has to be a connection and a visibility between the two, because more than likely, those two are going hand in hand. So I started asking questions with the leadership team, with our HR business partners about what are the things that were keeping us up at night, knowing what we wanted to achieve. The second one was, what does success look like in 6 months? So I stepped away from the learning metrics. I stepped away from thinking about the NPS that we could have that would be phenomenal, right? And started looking more into what that impact would look like. What will the people who have been through this program be able to achieve in 6 months? What will our retention rates look like in 6 months? What will our products look like in 6 months? The things that we are investing in people to do is what the impact and the success metrics need to be focused on. So I really spent a lot of time with our business partners and our leadership team thinking about what success in terms of impact and sustainability would look like in the next 6 months to them. And then finally, who needs to feel ownership over this for it to survive? Um, Learning happens every day. We learn as humans in almost every single thing that we do. But within an organization, there needs to be the proper backing of the program. There needs to be parts of ownership that are not just led by the business. I mean, led by L&D. One thing that I really learned early on, and it was a tough pill to swallow, but even when I'm standing in that room and I am the one delivering the message, I always think, am I the right one to deliver this message? Do I have the credibility with this office to share this, with this audience to share this message at this time? If not, who do I need to bring in? Who needs to be partnering with me? Who needs to feel ownership over this program for it to survive? So that was really some of the work in understanding the conditions. Then really thinking about what the program could do, right? And integrating it into real work. So, um, my initial proposal had L&D really pulling people into the program. Why? And leading it. Why? Because we had the dollars and the funding to do it. And it's the right thing to do. It's what L&D does, right? So, but then in rethinking it and hearing some of the challenges that we had, we were not only trying to solve for leadership capability with our leaders who were maybe manager and director, we were also trying to build that capability, that enterprise-wide leadership thinking with our more senior leaders. So why not have some of the learning really be leader-led and project-based? So what we ended up building was actually a very fluid program that was able to, the framework was able to be repeated time and time and time again. Why? Because the business always had a project that needed to be done. We always had senior leaders who were leading those projects already. But now what we were doing was bringing in people who we wanted to learn. We were using that as an accelerator of capabilities. And so every project, every case study that was worked on within that learning experience was literally something that the business was trying to solve. It was their problems, their stakes. And to do that, I couldn't have done that without understanding the conditions. This kind of ties back to the first one. So lead with relationships, not curriculum. So making sure that I had all the right people on board. I had all the right perspectives. The curriculum was important, but the next time I stepped into that room, I didn't start with this program is going to change your life because I started with here's the problem that we are trying to solve. Here is what I have found. And here is how I think we can do this together and the impact that it will have on us in the next 6 months. So by the time I got to talking about the curriculum itself, I really set the stage in that room about the relationships that needed to be built, with the relationships that needed to be built. And I'd really set the business case from the perspective of the business and not simply the perspective of what people would learn. Designing for sustainability and not events. Now, this one was hard because we all love a good learning event. And as someone who is a facilitator by heart and probably one of the most extroverted people you will ever meet on any personality assessment, designing for that sustainability and not that event is a skill. And what it means is you're building programs that are going to outlive the structure. So in this particular program, if I can go back to it, what started out as this would be a nice 1 week long program where everyone would learn the things they needed to learn. We would get to network and collaborate, actually turned into a 6 month program for our leaders. And before you panic, it was not 6 months in the classroom because it was 6 months of mentoring by leaders who were leading the projects that we were doing as part of the programs. It was 6 months of learning to put together presentations and executive presence and really speaking the language of how to influence those things that you're trying to change inside of the business and tying those directly to the business goals and the business opportunities and what we were trying to achieve. So it was really 6 months of learning while doing. So designing for sustainability, not events, means it's not built for the launch. And Marko, if I say your name too much, you can always tell me to stop. But I was just so happy to hear you talk about things like the level one and the satisfaction scores and that hot take, because it's really true. We went from thinking about the good level one scores, those are our metrics, strong rollout energy, everyone being excited about the program, and then nothing changing on Monday, to really thinking about how to build something to last. So this program and the structure for this program actually still lives within the organization in which it was built. It started out as a program for managers, senior managers, and directors. the structure of that program moved to be the learning vehicle for our VPs and SVPs as well, because the template was there. How we built the program was there, who we brought into the program, how we tied it directly to business metrics and outcomes, and how all of the work that was done as part of this leadership program was actually business problems that we were trying to solve. So it was built to last because it was built based on what the business absolutely needed. So when I think about what earning a seat at the table really means for L&D, it means these things, right? Really being able to speak the language, not the L&D language. Now, I'm the first one to tell you that I geek out on L&D language. So if after this call you want to sit down and we want to talk theory and we want to talk NPS and the best NPS scores we ever had, amazing. I can do that all day. But when it came to building that credibility and building up this leadership development team in the way that made it really a capability builder for the business and a real driver for talent, I had to really stop and speak the language of the business. I really needed to bring people in early. This is not new to most of our practitioners on the phone, are on the line with us today. Sorry, probably not phones, but on the line with us today. But it's not a review at the end, right? Because the other thing you heard, like I did all this research and all of this stuff, and I was so excited to stand in that room and present, but the presentation happened all along the way. So it wasn't a sign-off meeting. It was partnership from the beginning with the right people and making sure in some cases that their voice was part of that presentation as well. Knowing what the moment can hold. Many of us have been in different organizations, and organizations are very fluid. They do change all the time. And whether you're in a startup or an established business or a more mature one, you really need to know what the business can hold at that time. Just because the no happened then, it didn't mean a no forever. It meant a no to this because we weren't ready for it in the way that it was built. So making sure I knew the conditions when I came back that second time, I knew what the business could hold. I actually knew that that 6 month program, while I was afraid to say the word 6 months, in the way that people were brought along, the problem was so clear, the need was so clear, and the way it was tied to things that even if people didn't realize it, they were learning and they were doing the things that the business needed. I knew what that moment could hold, and that's a really key one. And if there's one thing I can leave you with, it is accept that this is a marathon, right? Those of us who have been in L&D for quite some time, we know that one failed pitch is not defeat. I used to tell a team of mine, you know, I probably get told no at least 10 times a month. And that is okay, right? It's not defeat. It means that I'm thinking, I'm innovating, I'm sharing, I'm learning. And finally, when that second program was released, the one that became the template for all the programs to come, it was because the first one really taught me where the real work was. And that no actually led to the learning that I needed to know to build for the future. So for me, saying no meant growth. It taught me this, and I'm not going to read it to you as much as I really want to. But it really taught me that for L&D to be a real business partner, the curriculum is actually secondary. It's the relationships, really knowing the organization and knowing what the organization can hold and what's possible for the organization to take in that particular moment. And so Build is here for you, bringing the right people along, making sure that when you sit down, I have a tool that I use called the spider net. Um, I'm not a fan of spiders, but I'm in Florida and we have lots of them. And I watch how they intricately built their net from the inside out. And it made me think about how to build networks that constantly move and shift every time a program is being built. So who needs to be at the core? Who are those people who will drive it from the outside? If you think about the depth and breadth of a spider web, it's several layers. And so I always think about who is in this spider net for this particular program and who do I need to bring along. What are the conditions that we're working under? Even if everything is right, if the organization is not ready for it, if it is not the top priority at that moment, even if you did everything textbook right and you don't understand the conditions, a no could happen. Integrating learning into real work. Again, this is one of the signature things that I've learned and I try and do with every program. It's never a case study that doesn't sound like something we cannot do. And in many cases, it is something that we are trying to solve. So at the end of your learning, not only have you learned a new skill, but you've solved a business problem, which is amazing to put into programs. Leading with the relationships, not the curriculum. Again, stepping into the room, making sure that everyone who is there, they already understand that we need to build capability, right? That's why learning teams exist. But it is, what is this particular problem? Don't just come in and say, here's the curriculum, it's beautiful, you see how it can do this. Talk about the impact that it will have and start there. And then our metrics are amazing for us to talk about in the room. They're amazing to even share with our senior leaders, but it has to be built within an ecosystem that is designed for sustainability. If you're finding yourself in L&D coming back to the drawing board and building a new program every single year, I would challenge you to stop and think about what are those repeatable elements that you can use so that the program can stand on itself. It's not about whether this particular one got a great MPS score and everyone loved it. It's about what is the impact of it and can that repeatable thing be done? Because that also saves time and money within the organization. So I think that brings me right to my time. So I want to thank you for going along this journey with me, hearing my mistakes and hopefully learning from them. And here is how you can get in contact with me if you want to continue the dialogue. So thank you.
Definitely us saying thank you, Tekeisha. This was really great, and I think I loved how I'll use the word simple. You made this because I think this is what we need. We need simple tools that can really guide us in doing things that are quite complex and quite hard. So thank you for making something that is quite difficult simple. We are now moving into the Q&A block of this session. Some pointers that I want to point out. We will be opening breakout rooms, and this is totally up to you if you want to join there or not. The idea is to give you the possibility to network with other people at the event right now. You choose if you want to, in the breakout room, discuss the questions that have come up. If you want to sit there and listen into the answers that you're getting on the Q&A and maybe discuss those answers. This is up to you. Or if you want to stay in the stream and just listen into the Q&A. We want to give you the possibility to network with peers and being able to discuss the topics that we have addressed during the session today. With that said, we've gotten a lot of questions. So I wanna get to it, and I wanna welcome both Marko and Robert and Tekeisha back on the stage so that I'm able to direct my questions straight to the one that is that they're aimed for. I got a question from let's see where I put it. Love it when I move things around. We got a question from Annie. She mentioned that they're gathering a lot of data right now, and from a lot of data, they're trying to measure more of a return of performance. I think what she sees in that the return on performance is tells a bigger story than maybe return on investment. I think this question is aimed towards both Marko and Robert. What are your thoughts about measuring return on performance, and what are the upsides and maybe downsides of doing it?
You want to go first, Robert, or do you want me to go
Yeah, go
first?
for it.
Um, Again, when we're talking about performance, I think a lot of it depends upon, those business objectives. I really, Tekeisha, I thought your presentation was awesome. Because I think what's really, really important when we have these conversations is it's really, really important for you to communicate what's important to you, right? Because if you're coming to me and you're asking for something, I need to know what the ask is, right?
Mm.
But the other thing that's also really important is you need to communicate why that's important to me, right? And so when we talk about performance, I think the key thing here, I think another key thing that I think my advice to L&D folks, when we talk about performance, we talk about things like this, you need to present it in a matter, and not only how it relates to the business, but I think there might be a little bit of a stigma in the non-L&D circles where L&D is viewed as sort of a maintenance of current state, right? That we're going to train people on the way we do things now, that we're going to do compliance, all these things, that it's just sort of like table stakes for where we're at. We're just treading water. And when we talk, and I think it's really, really important that we break out of that and talk about this as an enabler for future capability, that this will drive the business forward. So reframing that and changing that perception in terms of this isn't like a maintenance activity. This is a future sort of benefit activity, I think is really, really important.
Robert?
Yeah, I think fair points there, Marco. The I think the difference between the return on investment and the performance and the return on expectations is it's a difficult one, and it's one that I think over the years L&D has never really cracked. And I think it goes back to maybe focusing too much on the level one, level two, if you're going to use the the Kirkpatrick model, and not enough on the behavioral change and actually what difference is it making to the organization. So I think just focus on the outputs that are going to make a shift and a tangible difference to the bottom line of the business. And if we start doing that a lot more, the L&D is going to start getting the respect and that seat at the table that we've been fighting for a long time.
Michelle, if I loved hearing that kind of reframe to return on performance. I think there was a time where I saw a shift in L&D where we started to focus heavily on return on investment. So we were trying really hard to prove the dollars because in many organizations, um, I don't think I know one where L&D is really a revenue generator, where we're usually not. Right. And so then I saw this shift where L&D really tried to focus on how much money are we saving the business and really looking in those dollar terms. And so I really like this questions about thinking about it as a return on performance because that is the investment. So I think I might take that term. I like it.
Nice. I think I appreciate that. And I think that the next question is kind of aimed towards you, Marco. When you get a proposal from L&D, what makes you right away say, "Hey, that's really good," and the other way around? When you get a proposal and you're like, "This is not good," what makes it not good, and what makes it really good?
I think like not clearly, like a broken record again. It's not clearly articulating like the importance of the business. Like how does this like I said, I think the best advice is tell me what's important to you, but then also tell me why it's important to me, right?
Mm.
That's how you get my attention. So aligning with, my priorities, my incentives, how do I get my bonus, right?
Mm.
There's a lot to be said in that sort of thing. So the things that are going to catch my attention are the things that not only, I think help you accomplish your goals, because yes, you want to be a good leader, you want to help people, do the best, but also what helps me accomplish my goals. And if I can do both within one proposal, it's going to stand out more than another proposal where those objectives aren't quite as clear.
In both our blocks now, we've been talking about different kind of metrics that are interesting towards the business. We got a question or a comment from Christopher that I think is quite interesting because he's mentioning that not all organizations are that mature. He's trying to, what he feels, convince the business that these are the kind of metrics that we should be looking at, but that he's getting pushback, that they're more, they say, yes, this is interesting, but what they're actually measuring is number of seats. How happy are we with it? Do you have any comments on it? Do you have any proposals for Christopher, how he should keep on fighting this? Maybe the marathon analogy, Tekeisha, is a good one here.
This is a great question. So the unfortunate reality sometimes is that if that's where your business partners are, meet them there. And I'll share what I mean by that. Um, we all want to get to impact, but depending on where the organization is in terms of their relationship with the learning team, um, engagement is can also be a really good, strong metric because when starting out, it is, are people even interested enough in these programs for us to invest in? So I worked with an organization that was more of a startup, and that was their key metric. I knew that I needed to move it forward. So what I did in that instance is I did start with those, what I call level zero metrics, which is hours spent in training, number of people who attended, and then I did throw in the satisfaction scores, right? Because that is what my business partners were ready for and used to hearing. And once they started to really get invested in that engagement, I was always saying, and here's the learning piece, and here's the behavior change piece, right? I was always still saying those things, but I was starting with where my business partners were. And what it turned out was they really wanted to see if, especially in that startup space, should we be investing this money in here? Will our folks really actually do this thing before we move forward? So I would say, just it is a marathon. Start with those metrics that people are used to, but bring in the ones that you're also trying to bring in, because engagement is really a critical factor in learning as well.
I have just two quick like add-ons real quick, or three, I guess. One is when I say talk the language of the CFO, I'm not saying like try to put together financial models and like bunch of spreadsheets and stuff like. I'm talking about the actual story. Like, what is the story you're trying to tell? Number one. Number two, when it comes to metrics, don't beat it to death. I would rather have two or three really, really good, clear metrics that tell the story than 20 pages of random statistics, right? And then three, when you're looking at choosing the right metrics, try to focus on things that have a call to action around them. So metrics that indicate levers that management can utilize to advance the business, and only update those metrics when things fundamentally change. So keep it simple, tell the story, make sure there's a call to action, and update when there's a change to it, right? So if you gather data once a month, don't publish it weekly, right? Things like that.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that, just make sure it's aligned to the business plan. So give them numbers that actually matter.
Mm. I'd like to double click on a thing that you just mentioned, Marko, because you mentioned basically prioritize in the goals or the key objectives that you're looking into. And I think this is something that it's easy to say it. It's hard when you don't know exactly what the other person will think is the most important. What would you feel if someone from the business would use you as a resource to actually figure out what are the two or three key indicators that we should prioritize? Are they doing that,
Yeah.
or how would you react to that?
It's weird, right? Because on the one hand, you want to enable like parts of the organization to run themselves. Like you don't want to micromanage every part of the organization. So you want them to pick the things that matter to them, right? That indicate success to them. Uh, but I think having that conversation and finding that alignment, I think is incredibly important. And I think I will say business leaders this is one of the things when I talk to CFOs and CEOs, when we talk to them all the time, we say you can't keep your strategy a secret to everybody else. A lot of times people don't even know what are we trying to accomplish, what are the main things, what are the top priorities. So I think anything you can do to foster that dialogue is going to make it better off for anyone else. And good leaders should be open to that sort of dialogue. And the great thing about learning and development is, like I said, if you business leaders always say having a high quality staff or a well-trained organization is an imperative to them, right? The other thing too is you look at frontline people. I think there was a study that came out recently. I think it was McKinsey's like workforce development or organizational report that just came out. The majority of people expect to be developed and trained within their organization, right? So it's the leadership wants it, the people on the front lines want it. If you can be that connective tissue to bring those together, say, hey, these people want to learn. What do we want to teach them? And how does that help with the overall business objectives and strategy? If you can facilitate that conversation, that's a great way to position yourself as a strategic leader. And then you can hone in on what are the specific things that we measure to make sure we're on the right track.
And from what I'm hearing, this connects really well for you, Tekeisha, that you're mentioning, understanding the business. If you were to double click somewhat on these things that Mark are mentioning right now, what would you say, like key activities to do in that phase and actually going out there and understanding, learning basically what to do?
Yeah. I One of the things that I think is really important for L&D is to be in the places where the business is talking business.
Mm.
So by that I mean when in that particular example that I shared, I started to actually go to the MBRs, the monthly business reviews, to really understand what the metrics were that the business was speaking. Attending some of those particular meetings, definitely our earnings calls, just things like that, where earlier on in my L&D career, they didn't seem as important because I was like, is this really about learning? I'm really here to teach people this, right? But in order to do that, those are some of the places that I started to attend and still attend to this day. And I'm glad that Marco said it does not mean bringing a whole financial sheet, thank goodness, because I've never had to do that. Um, but typically, I also make sure that is whittled down to like four key metrics. And it could be like under engagement, for example, we will put things like anything that talks about how people engage. That means the numbers, those kind of things, but it's one metric that the business sees. So in attending those MBRs and some of those places where the business was, that's how I learned how to even position some of our metrics in the right way.
Mm.
So it's a question. Can I just follow up on that? So
Yes,
how did
please
you
do.
actually get the how did you actually get the invites to those meetings? Because I know a lot of our members they'd love to be getting there and actually having that the opportunity to share the stats with the exec team. How did you get through the door?
Honestly, Robert, I asked. I literally yeah, it was as simple as asking, and part of that in this example and in others was as a learning leader, I need to learn. So I position it as this is part of my development in order to be really strong and a really strong business partner. And at first I got a couple of people saying, well, you might not need to be in that room. And I think, Michelle, it may go to what you were talking about with the strategy and does learning need to come in at this moment? But over time, I just became that trusted partner. And part of it was I just want to be in the room to listen so that I can learn what's important to you.
I
Perfect.
think
Yeah.
that's really powerful. Yeah, it's amazing what we get for in life if we just ask the right questions to the right people, right?
Mhm.
And I think the other place that allows you to have that engagement is when you do budgets. I know that's like for some people that's like around the a little bit of ways off. Some people they're going through it right now. But when you're doing budgets, that is an opportunity for you to not just say what you want, but why you want it.
Mm.
So having a narrative around it. And I think if you position it correctly, I don't think any business leader worth their salt is going to, if you go to them and said, hey, help me understand how I can help you run the business more successfully. If someone say, you know what, I don't have time for that meeting, I'd really question their priorities as a leader, right?
I think, Robert, your question is so on the point there, because I think a lot of people are out there feeling like, I'd love to be in those meetings, but how do you get there? But I keep coming back to, I think we, just as both of you are saying now, we need to ask, can I be here? And here's the reason why I want to be here. This is what I will gain from this and why I need this kind of information. We're getting a lot of questions around that theme, I should say. The theme around, are we ready to talk to the CFO? Are we skilled enough to be able to have those kind of conversations? I'm hearing multiple comments that are around, I'm not sure that we are trained or skilled enough to be able to do this. How do we get there? Do you have any recommendations on how people that maybe feel that they are not knowledgeable enough to be able to have these conversations, where do they start?
Okay, I'll chip in there. I mean, it's one of the reasons. It's the main reason we set up CLO 100 was to bridge that gap for learning leaders who are operational and they want to become strategic. How do they learn the the language of the boardroom? How do they get the confidence? And we have a learning leader program which we run with Leeds University Business School, and it's very practical, and it's just and then we've got a lot of free stuff as well. So hit our website, and we've got an online community, and it's interesting how many people are in the same position. And when you get in the same room together and you're sharing those experiences, just like we're doing now, the tips that come out there, and some of them are just so simple, but make a massive, massive difference. There is stuff out there if you go looking for it.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Robert. Marko, Keisha, anything you want to add?
Again, I think a lot of it's just how you package the message, right?
Mm.
Where it's like, here's what's important to me and here's why it's important to you. And when I say speak the language of business, it's things like, hey, I understand that things are changing around us. You know, it's things are going to be better in the long run if we develop our people internally versus hiring outside the market. There's a lot of good research out there on like why these things are important and why it matters. So I would say do a little bit of your homework and tell that story, right? Like I said, McKinsey published and a lot of other people too. But they publish a lot of studies on these very things, like, high performing individuals. It's not a linear relationship, it's an exponential one, right? So there's a clear benefit. So do your homework, tell the story, and present it to, here's why it matters to you. Can we get aligned on this thing? Be a problem solver. CFOs love it when you come to them with a solution because all they hear is problems all day.
No, I love that. And I think there is a responsibility that we have in learning to learn. I can share that when I started with a firm, one of the first things I took advantage of the time that I had as a new person, right? Because when you join an organization new, you get to ask all the questions. And I took advantage of that time. And so one of the things that I realized is coming in, I came in at the director level, and I didn't necessarily have to go through the new hire onboarding, but I did, because if I didn't take that time, it would not have given me the understanding of the organization. And within that, as part of my onboarding, and a lot of organizations have this, and if not, I encourage it. There's the coffee chat or whatever you call it, where you kind of do the meet and greets with different people across the organization, very short, sometimes 15, sometimes 30 minutes. I took advantage of that. So learning what I had learned kind of at the surface level in new hire, then I would reach out and say, who's a good person who could really take me through like capital markets and what that means. And not so that I'm an expert, so that I can teach it to others so that they can learn it just enough so that they can really have the impact that they need in their particular part of the org. So there is that responsibility to learn it. And when people saw that that was how I was showing up, it also opened the doors for some of those meetings as well. It was like, oh, she actually knows our OKRs. She actually understands what we're trying to do. She actually knows capital markets. And so then I found myself being in the room a lot more.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Tekeisha. We got a question that I think is quite interesting. It takes our discussion from a different angle. It's from Karin. She says, well, I'm an external consultant, so I have a hard time getting into these meetings. What do I do? How do I contribute, and how do I make sure that I create valuable solutions without being able to be in these meetings?
It's a lot more challenging if you're external. You've not got the same level of contact. It's probably just ask again, isn't it?
It's relationships, right?
Yeah.
It's about building on relationships and what's your mandate within the organization, right? And so I think usually when it comes to external partners, because like we do that all the time, like ELB, it always kind of relates back to you got to position it's tricky, I think you always lean back, make sure that your agreement and your scope of work is inclusive of everything. You have to be really tricky on how you do it because people might be, suspicious that you're just trying to grow your scope or you're trying to, add on additional fees or whatever to the existing sort of engagement that you have. But I think with the way you ask, you have to be a little bit more careful around it because you're not necessarily an internal stakeholder like everyone else. So you've got to wrap it around in order for me to be successful, in order to accomplish this as part of what I'm already doing. Here's what I need to do. Because the worst thing you can do is come off as someone that's just looking to add additional hours or add additional dollars without a clear objective.
And in some cases, I know in a few organizations that I've supported, in some cases, the unfortunate reality is that there are certain limitations that we would have in place for external contractors. So there were certain places that they just couldn't be, or certain meetings that they couldn't be in. And I, being someone who has had contractors and consistently have contractor support learning initiatives within organizations, I think is really important. Again, going back to what Marko just said, it's about knowing the scope, but also having that person who can be in the meetings who's translating some of those things for you. I'd love to sit here and say that, you can overcome that barrier, but in some cases, depending on the organization that you're supporting, there may be some of those barriers. So it is about the relationships you can build and who you can get specific information from to do the task at hand.
Yeah. We also got a new question from Bagashiri. How do we transform intangible results into tangible results? Anyone want to pick up on that one?
I hate intangible results. Like as a CFO, like I hate them, right? Because there's got to be some kind of objectivity, and usually intangible results there's usually tangible like OKRs. So that's the other perfect example, right?
Yeah.
Like the objective is usually something that you can't directly measure. That's why you have the KR piece, like the key results that tell you, you want to that tell you specifically how to measure it, right? So it's like we want to become the best company at delivering product X. Okay, like that's an objective. It's kind of hard to measure that. Like, what are the key results? The key results are we going to see that in satisfaction scores from our clients. We're going to see that in timeliness of delivery. We're going to see that in market growth, like all these other things that you can measure. So I think that you got to, if it's something that's intangible, that's not related to anything you could possibly measure, that's really difficult. But if you can find the underlying things, or like if this is true and this is true, then this must be true. Or what are the objective components to the intangible? That's how I would do it. And again, it's all about the story you tell.
Yeah. And I think with the intangible results, if you can't relate them back to one of the key objectives, it's an irrelevance. Why have you done the training? if that's the result that you've got, if it's not shifting the dial on something that actually matters, then you probably shouldn't have been doing it in the first place.
I think is where we get stuck. Because when I heard intangible results, and I'm not sure if this is what you meant, but I instantly thought like soft skill training. How do you prove the value? How do you make a training on influence tangible, right? And it goes back to what I think the three of us are saying. You have to anchor it to something that is tangible. So what is the OKR that you can tie it to? And I would also say that if you are struggling too hard and you cannot really step back and think, is that the right training? Do we really need it? Because it should easily be able to tie to something that the organization is trying to achieve.
I think these were all the questions that have come in so far. Is there anything, is there any final word you guys want to leave us with before we say goodbye to everyone that has been with us today?
I think just to double down what Tekeisha just said, I think if you come to the CFO with the understanding that resources are limited, right? And then if you're able to clearly prioritize like the importance of what you're trying to do, I think that goes a long way in establishing your credibility and establishing a strategic thinker, right? Knowing that in most organizations, if not all organizations, a dollar spent over here means a dollar that's not spent over here. Not that everything's completely zero sum, but it kind of is, right? There's trade-offs you have to make. So being able to prioritize your objectives and things that are clear and measurable and move the business forward can sort of present you as more of a strategic thinker and go a long way in establishing those relationships.
I would say, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go first, go.
I was leaving you with the last word, Robert.
Thank you.
I was just going to reiterate, learning is really about building capability. And it is about making sure that the capability that you're building is something that the organization is ready for. And that you've told the story and explained it and spoken it in the way that makes sense to the folks that you are supporting. So a no doesn't necessarily mean that you got it wrong. It means that there's something that's just there that you need to go back and investigate a little bit more. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. Don't be discouraged by the no's, but also as a learning partner, you need to be strategically tied to the business. And I know we've been saying that for years, but really understand what that means for the organization that you are supporting. And be in those rooms, ask to be in those rooms so that you can learn more.
And just to follow that strategic theme is key. It's we're at a point now where learning budgets are being cut or they're being analysed and scrutinised. So everything you do has got to have an impact on the performance and be strategic. And if you do that, you've got a long and happy future in L&D.
I think that are some really good final words for us for today. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Marko. Thank you, Tekeisha. What a kickoff of this week you guys created. Thank you so much for all your honest and generous inputs that you've given us here today. This has been amazing. I want to share a few quick things before we wrap this up. You will receive an email from us in just a few minutes. It will contain a link with the recording from the session. If you want to share it with someone else, if you want to look at this again, this will be accessible for you. And don't miss tomorrow. We have a packed and great schedule for tomorrow as well. Tomorrow, the theme will be how to partner with the business for impact. We'll move from positioning into partnering with the business for impact. Tomorrow, we'll kick things off with Lavinia from Offbeat, and then we'll have Frida and Martina from Scandic that will talk about how they're actually partnering with the business to create real impact. Don't miss that. Same link, same time. I look forward to seeing you here again tomorrow. And thank you again for everyone that have been here, everyone that have contributed in the chat and made this an incredible start of our journey. See you all tomorrow and have a really good rest of the day. Bye now.